because of AI now, right? Companies, whether they like it or not, have to find the role of AI in their business operations. And the fear that everybody has is the data. Is the language model going to use their data, where their staffs are uploading there. So everybody wants to now begin to have conversations around data security that has been in existence years ago. Like, listen, I'm telling you, it's about 8, 9 years ago I started doing Windows rights management. I've not used the new feature. So as I'm teaching you guys with this class, the truth is these features are new, but because rights management has always existed with Microsoft long while, right? So it's that technology that has been improved to the cloud version, and so that's what I'm leveraging on. So now everybody wants to do data security. That has been there since, and they've been saying, oh, no, budget is a big tax. But now that people are doing AI, companies are now concerned that if they live in denial, their staffs will use AI tools that are not compliant, and they could get sanctioned. So they're now beginning to ask, how do I do this? And like I said, Microsoft has been so smart in their business strategy where they are bundling so much into this M365. So just because you have activated Microsoft 365 for your email, SharePoint, and this, they are now bundling all of this. So it almost seems like it's a better investment than going to just get a new third-party solution to integrate. So that's what Microsoft is doing. So back in the days, companies would go and use the likes of these apps are in my head, but they're going. Can't remember again. There are a couple of rights management applications that were in the market there and had strength when Microsoft was just doing rights management. But now Microsoft has improved there so much, and there's now high demand for skill sets, both as an administrator, as a compliance person, as a management of the platform. So if you're an M365 administrator, you don't necessarily have to key yourself knowing, just understanding the different modules and what it means and what you need to turn on. That gives you extra value as an M365 administrator. If you are a data security compliance person, just understanding how to create labels, classifications, the classifiers, that's a skill set. If you are in governance, risk and compliance, where your organization processes XYZ type of data, and based on compliance, they need to manage these records. You can focus on the record side. If you are on private, so there are different functions. And if you're in normal security in your organization, where you need to ensure how the whole security landscape, so data, how people processing data, what are they doing with data? Are people copying it out? Are people keeping it down? There's a section inside this that is for you. So just understand the solution, then find your niche, and then expand your niche and understand how to utilize that your niche to grow. So in a quick run session, I'll finish this in another 10 minutes because it's pretty straightforward. Is we have looked at how to classify data, if you remember. We've looked at how to label data, because we said know your data. Once you know your data, then you want to protect your data. How do you protect it? You create sensitive information types, you categorize your data, you classify them, and then you create labels based on the classifications, and then you now put the policies on them. But once you've done this and your data is sitting there, you also want to understand the life cycle of your data, because when you begin to go to governance, risk and compliance, that speaks to the life cycle of data. And we began to see that to understand the life cycle of your data, the first thing you want to do is to understand your retention strategy, right? So what's retention strategy? Most times it is, why do I want to keep this data? The data we generate every day, is there any need to leave it for forever? Are we going to say that for our company grows to 20 years, 30 years, this data is supposed to be there? And then if the answer is no, then the question is, are we binded by any law, internally, externally, that requires us? So for those who are in Nigeria, you know that the CBN requirement to say keep your data, I think 10 years, and correct me if that law still doesn't, if it's changed, but I know that they'll say keep data 10 years. So if you are in the banking system and you're in the compliance side, you want to say what type of data is CBN requiring that we keep for 10 years? So emails and all of that, because people will send their instructions via emails and all of that, even the Finacle transactions, the core banking transactions. But for instance, that data source does not feed into where we're covering in this class. So for things under our data source, which is email, SharePoint, you want to keep it. So if you're creating a retention strategy for emails, you need to bear in mind that by law, you need a marketer or a relationship manager in the bank would need to provide data of 10 years. So if somebody comes in the 90 of a transaction, if a customer comes and is creating a transaction that is as 9 years old, you cannot tell CBN that you don't have information about that transaction. That's what it means. So if you are a compliance person in the bank, you will be looking at retention strategy around that. So you need to sit down, do a lot of paperwork dimension. If you are aware, the law says that as soon as you collect people's PII and their transaction is done, you should purge it immediately. You also want to look at those kind of things that, okay, what kind of thing are we doing with clients that require us to collect their personal information, and what's the process we're using to collect it, so that as soon as whatever they're doing with us, some laws will say, I think it's GDPR that has something like that, correct me again if I'm wrong, that says once you finish collecting, if you are done with what you collected that data for, you need to purge it and give evidence to the end user, that's to the owner of the data, which is the person the owner of the PII. You need to give evidence to the person that you are done with this data and that you've purged it accordingly. So those kind of things are retention strategy. Once you have dimensioned all of this, you can only do it again by knowing your data, know these requirements, then you can now create a retention plan. So in creating that retention plan, what it will mean is, like I've said, you start to categorize the data. Is it personal data? Is it sensitive? Is it personal but sensitive? Is it just authentication data? So I gave an example that CBN will say transactional data. So we know that transactional data happen in email, and then they happen in the core banking application. So those kind of data are also kept for the 10 years. Is it log file access? I think PCI DSS has its own, and ISO have. They all have some requirements by law of the type of data that how long you need to keep. So once you've done this dimension, it now helps you to know what type of retention policy and labels that you want to create. Now we have retention policy, we have retention labels. Policies focus on the location. So the policy will say anything that is here, action this, while the label will say if you are creating this kind of data, then call it sensitive. If the data has credit card details, if the email has credit card details, if the library has credit. So the label is what you use to identify the data, and the policy is what you use to effect that governance on the data. So retention policies don't follow your data to travel, meaning that because it's tied to a location, if your data is in that location, then that retention policy would apply to that location. But once you have a label, the label follows that document. So if we create a label that says anywhere we see credit card details, purge, right? What it would mean, or purge after 5 hours or whatever. I'm just trying to reduce the condition so that we can process it. What it will mean is that if a document is generated or a chart is generated and it contains credit card, that label will automatically be binded on that data. So if I take that data from my email and paste it in my Teams chat, it's that data that has the label, whether it's in my Teams chat and my Teams chat doesn't have any retention policy, because the content that I'm conversing with, the content I'm playing around with, the data I'm talking about has picked up a retention label. That retention label action will play. So it's a bit tricky, but that's it. So the labels is what calls out on the specifics, while the policy speaks to just location or product. Now, when we're creating our retention periods, right, Once you have applied the label starts to count. And again, this was regarding last week. We got here last week, and somebody, I think her name was Cynthia, and she had asked that question. Her question was, we're saying a document called invoice, right, has been labeled that any document 6 years and above, delete. And this document was last modified May 2020. In this table, we're saying that the document will be deleted after 6 years, which is May 2026. The file, now we're saying that if somebody is now saying the file will be deleted 6 months too early, and we're saying that's false. No. Now the question that was asked is, if the file was created in 2019 but was last modified 2020, which date will it honor? That was her question. And I said I will take it away because I know it was honoring last modified. Now, in the new version of Purview that we're playing around with, when you're creating your retention label, it would ask you, what do you want? Do you want the label to effect on last modified or created? So if your label selected last modified, so that's why I called it here method. So under the method, there are two options: last modified or created. So if your method that you selected was created, then it doesn't matter if the document was changed today. If by tomorrow morning the document has hit the 6-year mark, are you seeing, it will delete it. So when we say understand your retention strategies, because if you have documents that are like that, where they'll keep modifying, and if you're modifying a document and you're going to delete it almost immediately, so you should be questioning yourself, what kind of retention strategy is that? So most times you will, depending on the use case, last modified is always selected so that it honors another duration. But again, it's last modified is also tricky in the sense that if somebody just goes and modifies something, maybe it's in his 6th year, it means he needs to stay another 6 years, because you're saying from when modified. Now you understanding how tricky. So there are lots of, this is why many organizations too don't like data security projects, because it's very intensive. It requires lots of thinking and processing. But where they are forced to do it is because lots of governance and compliance requirements now are demanding this. So these are some of the brain work you'll be doing before you actually action it on the software. You need to sit down and understand how data is used, processed in your organization. It's almost like people who are in data analytics, right? It's understanding what you want to get at, and they'll tell you that determines how they create those queries that help the client see value. But data can be there. If you don't know what to do with it, then it doesn't make sense. And it's the same thing with data security. You can be processing lots of data. If you don't understand how the data needs to transverse and be kept and survive, you might not know the right policy to put in place to give value. So does this clarify some of the questions we had last week for those who were in class?
Yes.
Yeah, so quick one here. This is just talking about that you can have manual retention label policies that you create manually, or you can automate them, and it's just calling out locations again. These are more KT, knowledge-based information. So it's trying to tell you that places like Exchange Public Folders, Skype for Business, Teams, Yammer Messages, they will not support retention labels, right? Remember, we have said that retention labels are on the document itself. We had mentioned that retention labels will talk about the file, the email, the location, the list. So we're saying that inside Teams, so what you can do with retention is that you can say chats should delete after 24 hours. So I don't know if you're in some organization. I just finished from a client where their retention policy on their chat is every 24 hours, your chat cleans off every 24 hours. So in fact, it was so unique to me because I was doing a project where I was telling someone to drop some evidences for me on chat, and only yesterday when I needed it. But we've been having that conversation for two weeks. Like, I remember something out. I didn't pay attention that every time I came, it was like a new chat. So yesterday I needed all the data. It was gone. I had to beg the guy to say, please, I know it'd be frustrating because I need to now go and pull out everything and start afresh and drop for me. But so it might look like what kind of frustrating thing is this, but based on their requirement, maybe they have a policy or a government compliance stuff that they need to adhere to. Their style is that chat the teams as a location as service. Chats will not individual chats, so not for channels. Individual chats don't stay more than 24 hours. So you need to understand what the organization wants to do. Where do they keep this data so that you can advise on these policies, and then you can have so you can also have manual retention labels where you've created these labels and people on their own can apply. So I can want to send a direct message to Madam Franca, and I don't want her. So we were doing a project, and my expectation with Madam Franca is that as I'm giving her this thing, her project is for 7 days. When she's done, I don't want that data to stay anymore with her. You can push labels where people can assign policies manually to data. So I can manually assign that this data or this email that I'm sending to her after 1 week is gone. I don't know if any of you have paid attention, but I want you sometimes come to, you saw an email from management or something, and when you come back for some weird reason, you can't find that email in your mailbox. I don't know how many of you I have. So once upon a time, I used to be exchange admin and active director, and I played that. Management to just come, and there are certain emails by law, they'll say this emails, and I'll have people call and raise service desk tickets. So service desk will send it to my team, and they'll be saying, somebody is saying that they don't know what is deleting their mails and all of that. Because I was in forensic, email side, professionally we'll say, oh, we'll investigate. Of course we'll investigate, but at that point in time it's not clicking. But when we do certain investigations, and my team will now push to me to say, oh, Joy, see, when I look at the period and look, I will now find out that I know what they're saying. So I just say, oh no, maybe you mistakenly deleted it. We've had some senior people be very firm. They'll go to the CI and say, your guys don't know what they're doing. My mails cannot be deleted. I'm very sure. And we'll just be smiling. And then when the person goes, I'll tell my CI, I'll say, this is the mail they're talking about. It was based on this. So there are cases like that, but again, it's like ethical hacking. You know how to hack, but you only use it ethically. So we say to people, you don't use this for malicious content. This is almost like how many of you on WhatsApp now you have the disappearing chat kind of thing, right? So that's the concept behind it, where I'm giving you something, but I don't want it to stay beyond XYZ. So you know how the disappearing message is now. Yeah. So even though some people use it to pass information that they shouldn't, but it's a way to put security where you're saying, I'm going to send this thing to you, but I don't want it to live on your phone forever. So you use the disappearing message. So that's where the manual retention label is, where as an individual I can say I'm sending a document to you and I don't want it to stay beyond XYZ. I will use that to apply and it will disappear. It will disappear. So the way you have manual is also the way you can do auto labeling on retentions, right? Again, an organization can say there's this type of documents. Remember, when you've done your trainable classifiers, maybe source codes, everything, they can say automatically apply it. I'll give a use case. You can have auditors come for to do some check, external auditors, and they will ask you guys for documents, policies, lots of things. You can create we'll get to that part. That's around events. So you can, for this particular project, create retention policies. And so as you guys are creating and you can create a folder for it or a SharePoint site for it. And as you are gathering all those evidences, because they are not you're giving them copies of your original stuff, but by virtue of those audits, they need those information. You can put everything in that container and put that retention label, so that as soon as XYZ is done, it deletes. So even if the even if the auditor downloads it on his system, if a retention label is on his system, what typically will happen is that because the person has taken it off the cloud, if they keep clicking, that it will look like a corrupted file. So they'll be clicking, it's not opening. Or in some instances, I don't know if it still works like that. There was some back then, it will push up and say the access to this document has expired, blah blah blah. Right? So you can use those in those kind of use cases where auditors have come and they're asking for. I again know that way back in the bank, we used to have that challenge where the things they're asking for are sensitive, but because they're auditors, we need to give them. So the question is, how do we manage the life cycle of this data? How do we ensure that this data that we're now taking out of our system to these auditors, the auditors are binded by NDA and all of that. However, we all know how life is, one flip mistake. So depending on how sensitive that your information is, you can still use this kind of retention label policies to control the life cycle of that data. So if it's going to a vendor or if it's going this, how long will it stay? And after XYZ, that data is not visible again. I think the big deal about adaptive scope, I was playing, I've not used this before. This is one of the things I was trying out last night, is also how you can scope for retention using automated queries. Again, like I gave in the case of, there's a project, we've created user accounts for what do they call them, for auditors. So this kind of things, I don't know, you might not know. So as a compliance person, if they put you in a team, say, oh, we're about to do this right project, the auditors will require this. As a data compliance person, your brain is thinking, all these documents are going to go. What will happen to the organization? So what do you do? If I want to rely on them telling me or giving me all the documents for me to know whether it's sensitive, I might not be able to. But we've created user accounts for these people, right? So we put them in a group, and you can use adaptive scope, right, to push those retention policies based on the group. So here Microsoft is saying you can use the adaptive scope on users directly, or a SharePoint site, or a group. So that's one use case where, again, another use case of using adaptive scoping. It's more effective because you can automate it. This page is just speaking to Microsoft. This is almost like if you were an Exchange administrator, this is possible. Like when people were migrating from Exchange Online to Exchange Cloud, because of the volume of their data. So when we see PST is so to you, the front end user, when you're reading your email in Outlook, right? You're just reading an email. To read the back end, that email, if we wanted to copy it out, we copy it out in PSTs. So this is just talking again, because your PSTs, your emails is data. If you had a large quantity of data that you needed to process, maybe you were an organization that needed to process, maybe there been a merger and acquisition, right? And some people have left the organization, and so you have their large amount of data that is in an obsolete system that you guys want to decommission. But because those data, the content, it's important. I remember a scenario like this where a merger and acquisition was done in one of the organizations I worked, and in that merger and acquisition, the company that was bought was a company merged from over 10 different companies over the years. So they had data that people were still trying to claim funds or transactions, but we didn't want those data to be inside the email system that we were working, because these were old and obsolete. So those kind of things, Microsoft can allow you push a network upload into a storage location so that you can now put some classifiers on that storage location. I remember when I was leaving the organization, I had to take the hard drive, and I said to the CIO, this is data that the bank can go into, litigations with, like issues, because inside here, however, I'm leaving. Who are you trusting for me to give based on my role, investigation and forensic? Like, who do I give this data to? It was in the hard drive. So in data management, you can have this kind of scenarios, and you can utilize the Microsoft Cloud part where you can upload it. So what Microsoft is saying is you can do your own network upload, or you can ship that hard drive. So this is just talking about the process, or you can ship that hard drive to Microsoft, and at the back end, Microsoft will upload that data for you into a SharePoint library site, and you can now apply your policies and retention classifications into that, so that as people are interacting with that data, there's still protection on that data. So this is a use case on its own. So if you're working in an organization that is focused more on offline data, you have lots of offline data that by regulation you need to keep, and people need to access from time to time. They don't access it all the time, but from time to time. So you guys have put them in USB drives, right? You typically will find what you're doing is that you have to build a process around who has access to the USB drive, all of that. Microsoft saying you can leverage the cloud, push this data to Azure storage, and then leverage on this data classification and securities that we have and retention on those data. Any questions, please?
No questions for now. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Again, you have the dashboard that can help you. Is this thing big enough? Can you guys see it? Is it big enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Sorry. So you have the dashboard that can allow you play around with, your data. So you can see locations where your retention labels have been applied. Again, this is good for reporting, management, visibility on what you've done. You can see your retention labels that speak to top sensitive information type. You can see your retention labels that are the top retention labels that have been applied to content, and you can see the locations that have this. So you have that dashboard that can also allow you to do some form of troubleshooting in the event where if there's an incident or a reaction to did we classify this kind of documents, and reporting. You have that dashboard. Now a bit of trick here. So we have what we call the retention policy lock. Instinctively, one would, want to use this, but again, you have to be very careful. So what's the retention policy lock? You can create a retention policy, and because you don't want anybody to delete it, you enable the preservation lock on it. It has its pros and cons, so that's just what Microsoft is calling out. So this is why we say practice. So you could test this out and see the effect, so that when your use case comes, right, you can understand, does this address the use case that we want? Do we have a retention strategy use case that we would never want anybody to delete it, or the impact of somebody deleting that policy is worse than even the document being missed? So you want to put a preservation lock, on it. These are the kind of that's just what Microsoft is speaking here. What you can do, if you put a preservation lock, you might not be able to extend the retention period. So if I've selected 6 years on that retention period, if I put a lock on that, policy, I cannot go and modify the policy. That policy will stay like that forever and ever. So those kind of scenarios, nobody can delete it. You cannot add additional locations to that policy now because you've put a lock. Labels too cannot be removed on that policy. It's not a biggie, but it's a biggie in the sense that if it's a life policy and you now come back, maybe you're not sure, somebody now comes and says, no, this particular policy should be extended to you. You can't modify it. So you need to be very sure why you want to put a preservation lock on a policy. Again, this is just explaining from when you receive a mailbox to when it's deleted, what retention in exchanges. People who are in Exchange administrators, they currently would like this kind of thing. So when you purge a data, where does it go to you, the end user, when you delete your email? For those of you who use Outlook, when you delete your email, you see it in your deleted mailbox, right? That's where you see it. When you delete it from your deleted mailbox, to you, it's deleted. It's not gone off the server. How many of you have paid attention to that? When you delete an email, you still see it in your deleted folder.
Yes, that's true. I've seen it.
Yeah. Now, when you go to your deleted folder and you purge your deleted folder, now there's nothing again as a user that is showing you. So in your mind, you have deleted the email, but no, that's what we want you to think. You have not deleted the email of the infrastructure. You've just deleted it from your view as a user. So it would move again to another section. So that's why when we're doing certain investigations, in fact, like I said, lots of frauds that happen in the bank, when you have people do this kind of transaction and come and say, oh, maybe it was somebody that because in their brain they've deleted it. We can, from the back end, you can still find some of these things using e-discovery and litigation holds and all of that. So this is just explaining that you can delete an email from the front end. It goes to deleted items. When it's in deleted items, when you delete it from deleted items, it enters recovery. In fact, as a user, if you go up to your Outlook, there's a place folder, I think you now see recoverable items. You can recover it there from yourself. But I think that recoverable items has its own retention period. Once it goes there, it still stays at the back end for a while before it's now eventually deleted. Right. Question, please. Somebody has her hands up. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Joy. My question is in regards to user privacy and laws. If a user has deleted a mail and is still being held, what are the privacy concerns that you may have had in your experience that may have been an instance where, because like you just mentioned now, as a user, you believe that these mails have been deleted, but they are still being stored. I'm not looking at the legal aspect and the privacy aspect as to such a thing.
Okay. So, is it in favor of the user and the organization, or in compliance? What I'm trying to say is it that, so what Microsoft is explaining here is, if you have a data that you're processing, right, and that data is used by Exchange, they're explaining to you how it works here, that the fact that the user has received it in their inbox and deleted it, right, does not mean that data is off your environment. So as a compliance person, if what you are complying to is that data needs to be deleted, are you seeing it? They are letting you know that just that the person who used the data deleted it and says, I'm now compliant, I've deleted off, it's not my email, does not mean that it's been deleted immediately. So if what you are compliant to is saying delete immediately, or say maybe delete in 5 years, just know that this is how it will take its while to process, so that you can know whether you are meeting your compliance requirements. On the other flip side, if somebody is deleting it because they are being malicious, right, it's saying again, you can recover this information in the event where somebody deleted, so that they can claim and say, oh, I didn't see it. You can recover it from these different layers, from deleted items, which people are now aware. So when they delete, they go to deleted items and delete off themselves. You can recover from recoverable items, or you can now recover when it has entered. So at that point, it enters the discovery hold, and you can use e-discovery to pull it out from there, this other side. So this recoverable item side is no more visible. So at this point, you can see the message is deleted, but it's still in recoverable items, and you can use e-discovery to either purge it out. Are you seeing it? So if you need to adhere to a compliance, you can have e-discovery queries that we call them cases, rather. That's what Microsoft calls it. You can create e-discovery cases that search for this kind of data and now do the final purging, so that you can now say you are compliant, so that your front end users reply your email and say this data has been deleted. If it is via email, it's still somewhere that we call recoverable items. So you can use this 4B, use e-discovery to create cases that purge it off the system. Does that answer your question, Ayo? Sorry, please, did I answer? So that if not, I can rephrase again. Oh. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I was saying, did that address his question? Because I don't think he's here. He's not responding.
I believe it did.
Yeah.
For me, I followed up with your explanation, and it's fine.
Yeah, please. I think it was Ayo. If maybe your mic, if you're back, that's just basically what this is explaining. So it depends on, again, what are you trying to achieve, as a retention, as a compliance person. Yeah, someone's hands up.
Good morning, everybody.
Uh,
My name is Janet. Based on the question the last speaker asked, my mind just went to this viral post on social media that a cheating husband deleted his emails, and then the wife, I don't know how the wife now found the emails that he deleted, and now the man wants to sue. I don't know whether it's Google or Microsoft. So, in terms of the legal part of it now, what do you think? Like, is it the company that is at fault, or is it the man that deleted the emails and thought he deleted them, but somehow the wife still found
Perfect
them?
example to answer the guy's question. So good. Now, the man is a consumer of whatever platform. We don't know the platform he's using for the email, right? He didn't mention. Did they mention?
No, I don't think so.
Yes. Now, whatever platform he's using, it is a.
I think it was iMessage, Apple,
Okay. So let's go.
iMessage.
Yes. Again, number one, the guy will not win the case because we don't read. When we download solutions, we don't read terms of engagement. It will be clearly written out there what the responsibility of the provider is and what your responsibility. It's almost like if you're doing cloud. If you study MS 900, AZ 900, Microsoft, they'll tell you shared responsibility. What is your responsibility as them, Microsoft, giving you the platform, and what's the responsibility of this? Many people don't know, don't read all those things. It's too much. Especially technical people don't like. Even end users, we jump into it now. But let's take that scenario. Let us take it that the contract that was signed is that I am supposed to, when you delete, remove all your personal data from my system. That is what we have in the agreement. Then he can sue. But if what we have in the agreement is that I keep your data and process it for XYZ period in line with XYZ, then you cannot hold the company responsible. There's this thing Microsoft does on the cloud when they give you your dashboard on your health, because of the kind of, for Active Directory, because of the kind of data which is around login and all of that. I think there's a part of GDPR that talks about that data cannot be stored more than 30 days. Microsoft will tell you that this data that they're helping you give insights into your identity can only be kept for 30 days. Now, if within 30 days is when you get compromised, then they begin to look around, how did you get compromised? But if after 30 days is when you now get compromised, you can now sue them because you're saying you're not supposed to have had this data after 30 days and the compromise is showing it happened because of your environment. Why did you keep this data? So with that example, the question the man should be asking himself is, when he was using that platform, so whatever platform he's using, I don't know, so he could be using an iPhone, but his email is not Apple, his email could be Google, then it's not Apple that has the problem. Because if the wife retrieved the email, right, then the question you should be asking is, how did the wife retrieve it? So in forensic, what we'll first of all take is, how did the wife find the email? And taking whatever is his device, we'll give his phone, you'll be able to find it where it's stored. Oh, she got it from the phone. So how did she get it on the phone? The email client. Okay, when you deleted it, where did it go to? You know, because like I said, naturally when people delete mails, they don't see that it goes to their deleted folder. They just, as long as they don't see it in their inbox, in their mind is deleted. Even when you use Facebook today and you delete a picture, at the backend database, it goes into a soft delete. But if you go back to the terms and conditions with Facebook, that's why you see Facebook has been getting sued and they keep improving on their list, because the laws that they were putting and all of us were accepting was saying that they will keep this data for XYZ period, but we don't. So that's why you see America keeps fighting them, because they go back to these laws, read it, come back, query them. You see my Facebook keep paying fine and fine. They rather pay fine because they know what they are doing. But you at the front end, what you are saying is that I've deleted it. I don't have these pictures, but your pictures are still somewhere in a database. So for that man, he might not get away with it because the question is which of the platforms did the extraction happen? If it happened from the email platform and he's saying he deleted, the email people will say, what is our policy? If our policy says that we keep your emails 30 days in recovery, even after you've deleted, then it's still you. You should have protected your user identity because it's still there, or we keep it at the back end. So if you look at this case here, in this case, if there is a fraud in this kind of environment, right, from my experience, it's not the front end user I'll be worrying about. But however, when that case will come to me and say, oh, Jonathan's mailbox, Jonathan was the one interacting with XYZ client, and the client is claiming that a data that they shared with us has been exposed. The first thing I would do is, who are the people that interacted with this client? So they'll say Jonathan, Franca, Chidima. Good. We'll query their mailboxes, and we will see that the mail is not in their inboxes. So a Jonathan probably, when he's facing investigation, will say, after the business, I deleted because that's our practice. We delete. And they're like, okay, fine. Chidima will say, well, I deleted. Franca will say, I deleted. So that's fine. As the forensic person, we do the check and we confirm the mail is not there. What we'll see is that, but it's still within our recoverable item period. Now, this recoverable item phase is not accessible to front-end user, but it's accessible to the back-end, the compliance person, the exchange administrators. So that means the exploit or the compromise happened at that end. Then we now go into a discovery audit where we can see who has created a case that has the identifier of that data, and we'll be able to find who queried it, right? Now, Purview also gives you that ability to be able to do e-discovery on the data, where you can now see how many people have had access to that data. So that's where the Purview e-discovery comes, where you use it for investigation, because you have things that are no more at the front end, but they are sensitive data that are being processed, and it's only an administrator. So it will be everybody who has e-discovery roles that will now be the people who will be investigating, because it means that it's one of them that probably would have in the course of purging, because when you are trying to create the retention to purge this, you actually see the actual email. So as you mature your career, you're going to get to a place where you can't talk. Like I tell people, so when people think about putting lock on your phone, in my own marriage, my husband knows that because of the kind of jobs I do, I don't just give access to my phone to anybody. Because if you have access to my phone, you can get access to information that you're not supposed to see. So access to my phone is not restricted, not because I personally have anything I'm hiding. I personally am working in job roles that have what they're hiding. So it's not. So and you're going to some in the career, you're going to mature to that point where I was in my years in the bank, I was seeing things I shouldn't talk about, because when I'm doing certain investigations, I need to extract that data, and in the course of extracting data, I'm now visible to certain things, and because I know that in that instance, if that information goes out, I become one of the suspects. So I keep it within my close circle, myself or the people I'm working it with, because we now become the suspect of how that data has leaked. So to answer your question, if we follow this kind of situation, if it was an exchange, if the man has deleted it and deleted it off deleted items and yet are recoverable, then the question would be the people who have e-discovery. So it could be that the wife knows somebody in his office, that she has tipped. Like in investigation, you have to think like this, that she has tipped. But if it's a personal information, personal email infrastructure, then probably he didn't understand how that platform handles data. So he must have thought he had deleted it, and his wife might be more informed, or might have reached out to somebody who has said, find the information here. It's almost like people who delete their chats on WhatsApp. I've done an investigation for a personal family where the wife was suspecting the husband. So he deletes off his chat, but he doesn't delete off the. So if you take your phone now, it will show you everybody you're chatting in the most recent. So for instance, if I'm chatting with a Chidima, her name is there. But if I open Chidima and it's blank, what that means is that I've deleted my conversation with Chidima, but I've chatted with her recently. You know that, right? But people don't think about it. So when people want to delete off chats, this please don't go and delete off and cause problem in your marriage. People delete off their chats. They don't delete off the individual. So as an investigative person, if I take up your phone, I can know that you're trying to hide something because you have deleted off the chat, but you did not delete off the person in this sequence. So that means you are chatting with that person very recently, but you're deleting off the content, and your deleting of the content is now a question of why, and that's left with you. And so that alone gave the lady reason to go back to her partner. But I'm saying that's how you think in investigation. So the man could probably have deleted off, but didn't go somewhere, and the wife is more informed, or somebody would have pointed her somewhere and she would have been able to get it back. So happy suing for him. All right, so that's what this is explaining. As a compliance person, you need to understand what deletion means. So if you are saying that we are compliant to this law and this thing says we should delete this, what does it mean to you? So what does it mean to the platform that you are using in your organization? That's why Microsoft took its time to explain this. The same thing for SharePoint and OneDrive. Again, in SharePoint and OneDrive, we have what we call preservation hold library, right? You can create your retention strategy there where you say, take from the main one, put in the preservation hold library, just so that that preservation hold library can only be accessed by XYZ administrators. So maybe in the course of that use case, the organization will say, we're done, we don't want users to see it. However, we might come back and request for this XYZ. You can have what we call preservation hold libraries, where you put this information, move it away from the main location, put it into a preservation hold library, and then based on the time duration on that preservation hold library, you now purge it out and delete it. The same thing with Teams. For Teams, again, you can push the data to Azure Cosmos DB. You can use where you take the data, push it to a database called the Azure Cosmos DB that does some form of hold, again, for a period of time before you now purge it out. All of this is just speaking to the fact that you might have a retention policy where I don't necessarily need to take out the data off my environment immediately, but from the user's end, right, I don't want the data visible anymore to the user. So it's like saying you want to reduce your there's a word in cybersecurity for that thing, where my footprints, so I can be compromised from front end, so I want to reduce my footprint. So I want to know that from a end user's perspective, even if they hack my end user's password, they will no more be able to see that data. It's only at the back end, which only XYZ type of administrators have access. So those are use cases, and that's why Microsoft is calling out what deletion from front end means. Because some people who are still doing manual data protection, they will say, when you fill the form, they'll not say, respond back that we fill this checkbox, deleted off my mailbox, deleted off this. We're saying that checkbox is just you citing yourself. That data is still within your organization, right? Based on the timestamp that Microsoft has put there. So if your requirement is lesser than that time, then go to the backend and use eDiscovery and purge that data. Things that you can restore, as an administrator, you can restore files from Recycle Bin, SharePoint, document, Office, OneDrive contents. Just saying that in the need where you need to restore data, you also have these options to restore data. Again, in some organizations, they use for messaging too, to manage mailboxes. You can do things like that. I don't know, many of you who use Microsoft 365 online, you will see that if you open your Outlook, you have your inbox, then down you will see online archiving. So some organizations do that to manage mailboxes. They will say, after 30 days or after 60 days or after 90 days, move mails from here to here. So again, my previous life, I've had people raise service desk tickets. When you check, you see that the mail is in the archive, but when they are doing their search, it honors only your active mailbox. So you now need to tell them to do search all mailboxes so that you can go to the archive and pull out the mailbox. So this is just talking about activating archive mailboxes in Exchange, which is a location you can also use for pushing data lifecycle strategies around mails. So instead of just doing delete yet, you can say move to online archive, and after online archive you can now say move to XYZ. So that way, if users still need to access it but you don't want it to be at the top of what they do, you can move into archive and then you take it up from there. So here's, we've talked about this, where you can use e-discovery cases here to recover content from both active, inactive, exported PSTs. So e-discovery permission is one very key permission. So in identity and access management, one of the things we check also is who are members of this group, because members of this group have power to do and undo in an organization. So you don't necessarily have to be global admin. So you can strip everybody, nobody's global admin, but there are certain roles and groups that are critical to the organization that if people have access to they have the ability to do XYZ. So as a compliance person too, these are some of the things that will build on your checklist. If you're auditing, I know those days guys in audit will come to IT to audit and they'll say we want to see members of domain admin. Now we're moving to the cloud. So if you're in audit, these are the kind of groups you want to check who are members of this group, because they have the power to read everybody's email, create cases that can purge out information and data that they can play around with. And then we go to record management. In records management, where again, the whole thing that we're processing is data, but when it comes to record management, it's taking data and calling it record. So it's a bit tricky. When you're processing data, you can see it's what it is data. But if you're having to comply to a standard, it's seen as the record of, like, the compilation of those data now become records that you want to manage, right? So that's where records management become. So maybe you want to see this patient's history. You're a hospital and you need to adhere to XYZ. We're working with a consoler and we want to see the medical history of XYZ and want to see from when the person came in. All those things, the compilation of a particular information is now data, right? It's now records. So Microsoft Purview allows you to be able to create those kind of use case scenarios where you need information as to certain things and you want to be able to group them together and action them. And so that's where, in a summary, that's where record management is. Again, in records management, we can do labels and also policies, right? In record management too, Microsoft allows you to, those your classifiers you've created and your labels. You can use a CSV to match your record to a location or to a type of data that you want to deal with. Then, so this is where it is. So you can create a plan offline, take the CSV template, match it to your data labels that you have, and when I say that I'm going to import this, and when I do, anywhere you see this matching data, give it this type of record labels. So you have your normal data labels. You can now create your record labels. Your record label is what says that any data that has XYZ automatically is a record. And the reason why you want to do record management, like I said, is because you have to comply to a particular law. And so the data labels that you did were just to classify that your organization has that kind of data. But the record label is to say that this type of data, we need to action this law to it, or this activation, or this policy, right? And so that's where record labeling comes into play. And again, using the example of probably you have a dedicated project with auditors, you can do record management again for specific events, right? You can say these auditors are asking for XYZ type of data, so we're going to create labels. They're asking for, I've worked with, I think, ISO auditors that will come and say, we want to see all your policies, you know, and your policies are unique to your organization and how your organization transacts. They can also come and say they want to see all the logs of everybody who has logged into the core banking application. They come again, they want to see certain, TBN comes for auditing and they want to see certain bank transactions, right? These are sensitive data that typically people will just export and put it in a USB or put it somewhere. If by law those data have people's PII, right, and you are governed by that framework, that CBN one regulatory body is asking for does not automatically mean that you cannot be sanctioned, or sorry, you cannot default by another regulation body. So you need to say, oh, how do I ensure that when I'm giving this data to this regulation body, this record is purged because by this other regulation body that I'm governed, that this kind of data should not exceed XYZ when being shared with a third party for investigation. Again, if you're in the governance, risk and compliance, you see that you have lots of laws. You need to understand how they overlap with each other. So one regulator can't be asking you for an information, but there's another regulator that has put a clause that if you need to share this, it should not be XYZ. So you need to say, how do I understand this exchange of hands? That's where record management comes in. So for those specific business engagements, you can create labels that now, because remember, you already have the data label and classifier that can classify those documents for you. So you can know, maybe you have a classifier, Contoso IT policies. Now you are doing a audit event that is requiring that you take your Contoso IT policies and share with them. And you have another policy that says that if you need to take those kind of documents outside the organization, it should be purged after 30 days. I think you can now create an event-driven retention label, maybe called, and maybe that audit is ISO 27000. So 27000, and maybe with digital jewels. And then you now, when you create that label, you bind it using whether user group, SharePoint sites, or users directly, and it will say anytime it sees this IT Contoso labels, give it another record label called XYZ. I know it's looking, I'm trying my best not to make it cumbersome, but I'm just saying that you can finish your data classification, but you now need to meet regulation and compliance, and the use case can require that you understand how these documents move, and so they fall under records management. Yeah. So in summary, you create your labels, decide if you want your labels to mark records or even regulatory records. So you can have your own record labels or based on regulatory labels, and then you plan how you want to publish these labels. Then you create the triggers that will call for them to be actioned. Okay. Yeah. We still have 30 minutes, so let's quick. Any questions while we go to the next, which on your outline is what is supposed to be actually for today, week 4. Any questions, please?
No questions for now. I think we can move on.
Yeah.
Perhaps when we start the labs, it will make more sense.
Yes, from next week, once we come in, we're going all the way from beginning to the end of the lab. Grab water to drink as I pull up the slide for week 4. How many times I look at Instablog once in a while. I look at the KJ and the rest. So for those of you, how many times have you seen some corporate documents and you just ask yourself, how did this document come out online? Do you guys ever feel that way?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yes.
There's certain like it's so authentic, like is the letterheaded, is the, and I'm just, as much as the tatafos human nature of human being have seen it, I'm like, hey, now wow, the cybersecurity part of me is, I'm feeling so, oh my god, how did this? And for someone like me who does investigation and forensic, I'm already thinking, if I'm here, I should be able to find who was the source of the leak, But those kind of scenarios are what makes me just smile and say the opportunity for data security is still way like it. We have huge opportunity in this part of the world because there are lots of things that we do. People are more interested in being the ones who share information with the bloggers than understand the implication, right? Both as an organization and as individuals. So there's a whole lot. They're sending people's information. If it comes out in the developed world, like that organization will be paying some huge fine. So the organization needs to be able to, even if somebody takes their phone and take it, like we've said, they need to be able to say, we know how many people this data has passed through. So that's why I say to people that we don't have a technology that can find out if you used your phone, but because we have a technology that can tell us everybody that had access to the data, everybody that opened it, right? It reduces the pool of people and we can trace it down. I've had an investigation I've done in the bank where the guy was going to commit fraud. He knew, and I said because of the evidence we had, but he had booked his leave, so he wasn't around. He wasn't going to use his account. So once upon a time, he had social engineered his colleague who, for some reason, was juggling work, and it's not easy being a married woman in bank work. So at one time she had said, oh, please, can you help me log in? So she had shared her password with him, and he had social engineered, so he now had a password. He wasn't going to use his own. He had booked his leave, and then on the day he was going to action what he did, he was on leave, so he did not come to work, but he went to, and this guy is so smart. Like I thought, I say people who do fraud, if you play into their head, you wonder how they plan themselves. Now in the banking industry, there's this thing that they do. They lock your IP address, because every region has an IP address, to your ID for the core banking. So if you are in Adeolodeku branch, Adeolodeku has a unique IP. It's tied to your identity. If you go to Adeniyi Jones branch, you won't be able to log in. Now, this girl has shared her password, did not change it when she came back. Dude had planned himself, and they had reposted her to another branch. So he came to that branch and he logged in and initiated the transaction. Just because he was not, when he was queried, the first response he was like, he was on leave. That's his response. He was on leave, and he really was on leave. But when we began to check fingerprints and footprints, where we found that gave him away was the printer that the bank uses. We assigned user identity to it, and it's tied, and his name popped up that he printed on XYZ day at XYZ branch. That was all I needed to start tracing. But I'm saying the power of data, people don't understand, is in the systems. So as you build this career path, just expand your thought. You begin to see how data can help in this security journey. Like printer was what lagged for. Like we had done everything and then again, when you see the first slide, if you go and watch day one, the first thing that was on the slide was know your data, know where it is. It was where is everywhere. We use identity, and I just went to log sources and I just saw this username is here on this day printing. Why? And in fact, because it was printing was more reason why it got me curious, because printer is physical, right? Probably if it was a system, because yes, we had even seen him logged in at one time and he claimed it was his email. For that check showed that it was from his phone. So again, when you think that you're hitting something, now find something, now knock out. So when we checked, now saw that it was from his phone, I was like, oh, possible Outlook, he's on leave. He could possibly have checked his email, because we didn't have a policy where in some organizations, if you're on leave, you can't even access your system. We didn't have that policy, so you could access your system. So that kind of took us back again, because when we get that information, we take it to the team who does the user facing. I used to be back end, so people would not know that I'm the one working on those kind of information. But when we give information to the front end team who is doing like the Inspector Pali with them, asking because they have information. But when we got this, it was easy to nail him down. They now played emotional intelligence questions. And already by this time, they've picked the girl's account who did the fraud. So, first of all, that person will be sleeping in panty because that's the account that does the fraud. But this person is saying I didn't do it. So that calls for curiosity for further investigation. And so it was certain questions that just, matched where, because she had said, because in one of the things we always say is benefit of the doubt. So yes, your account did it. When you say you're not the one, the question is, have you shared your account with anybody? Already that's an offense, but so she had tried and now remembered and said him, and then the guy was saying, is she okay? I'm on leave. And that's how we started investigating. But printer ID gave him away. So I'm just calling out the power of data and what you can use. So it's the same thing with record management, where data is traveling, who has access to the data. You can fingerprint all of this and be able to trace any form of fraud. So in a quick dash, this particular slide is not again, is more around just investigation. So that's why I felt we could do it today, because there's not too much. This one requires pure hands-on lab for you to see how it is, but this is investigation. You have compliance policy to investigate, you have things to see, you have regulations to meet, how you use it. So this is just talking about who should have access, the key role. So you can have a reader role, contributor role, the assessor role, or you are the actual admin, right? And this is where you're using the compliance manager to do lots of investigation. Your dashboard is your baby in this instance. Your dashboard will tell you so many things in Purview. Your dashboard will show you where data has gone to, who has accessed what data, who has shared what data out, what labels are used, what platforms are high in use, who is pushing volume of data out. Like you can see, we're having a spike on OneDrive. Like lots of data is leaving OneDrive out, and that can spawn some form of curiosity. So what do you want to do? You want to examine your dashboard, you want to look at your score, your actions, your visibility. You want to look at compliance status, gain visibility into your compliance status, and then to help you to manage and improve actions for regulatory alignment. The compliance manager dashboard is your baby as a compliance person. So whether you're compliance from an audit perspective, or your compliance from internal control, or your compliance from compliance, because there's a thing called compliance, right? Go to the dashboard. Microsoft has done it in such a way that there's so much information there that can allow you to start and say, okay, what am I doing here? You can say, okay, what platforms are high in use? What type of labels? What type of SITs am I seeing more that are here? Because the default SITs will be matching your type of data. It kind of just gives you an idea on how do I now want to secure my environment. Use it to analyze. You can see metrics, scores on each of these recommendations. So it will say, okay, this is high risk, medium, low, that can allow you to come up with preventive actions to address them. So this is typically how you will see, you have, it can tell you preventative, detective, corrective, give you some points that just talks about how your compliance. There's also the inbuilt templates that tie to someone. So if it's GDPR, HIPAC that your organization is, you can take the pre-built template and run your compliance score on it. So this is the e-discovery I've been talking about, and e-discovery is now, for lack of a better word, gang. E-discovery is now gang in the world of today. These investigations I talk about I was doing e-discovery 3-4 years ago. That's why I said then there was no Purview. What we were using was Windows Rights Management on-prem servers, and then it moved to information protection. So it was more of e-discovery on Exchange Online, and we could see contents. Like I could query mailboxes and get actual emails, right, or conversations that have happened And so you can use eDiscovery to just, so the content search side, we just do the normal search, you put a keyword or a query to search. And then in the standard, you can now use it to create a case. So you know, if your investigation, that's how it is a case. You can say, okay, I'm trying to investigate for XYZ fraud. And then you create it, and you can find that data, and then you can put a litigation hold on it and say this data will never be purged out of the system for XYZ period, right? So even if it gets to Microsoft's own default purge time, it will not purge it because you've put a legal hold on it. And so we have cases like that where we've given them data, they've gone to court, they're still back and forth in court, and then the judge will come and say more information and all of that. Because we have some legal holds on certain information, can help us. You know how emails have conversation type, trails and all of that. It can help us instead of starting afresh. We have something to use to play around with, read emails, read the contents, try to see what's going through the user's mind and create more cases. So you have that in the standard version, and then the premium version is where you can do things like tagging, filtering, indexing. Like there's a whole lot you can do here. That's why Microsoft doesn't give this free. As I said, eDiscovery is now Gengen. There's now eDiscovery Premium and Standard. So this content search was what I used to use back in the days. So for those who are in the investigation and forensic side of cybersecurity, right? If you have clients who are using Microsoft 365 and you have a case that you're investigating, trust me, this will help you so much. You'll be so amazed at how much people do in the office, and I don't know whether they forget they're in the office, how much they put in chats, conversations, emails, and how much, if it is tied to a corporate information too, how much you can get, how much data you can get in seeing how much people have played around with company data, whether sending it to their personal emails or sending it to their, like, this tool is very good. So for those in the forensic and investigation side, you can focus on building your compliance skills with eDiscovery, content search, eDiscovery. It's, so in content search, you want to look at who can, again, for those in audit, like I said, your own worry should be, who are the people that have access to this, because they can do and undo. So in the world of cybersecurity, you know that now they are recruiting people to go to companies and work like staff to just get information. Some companies are doing that level of, some fraud cyber cartels are doing those kind of detailed social engineering where they get people to be recruited and poached and go. It's the same way they do the ones where they create fictitious companies and get you to apply, and you think you're working for a proper company, but you don't know you're working for a cyber crime cartel. So especially for lots of people who are doing remote work, working for foreign companies, pay attention, Google them. Who are they? What do they do? In recent times, what we're seeing is that that's what they're doing, because everybody is enjoying work from home. And most times we're seeing that the victims are people from our region because we want to earn in foreign currency. But the companies that many people are working for, they don't know, are cybercrime cartels. So pay attention to these things. But back to this is one too. So for the auditor side, you want to know who are the people in the organizations that have access to this, because they can see so many things. And from the forensic side, you want to know how to use this tool, because it's going to allow you to be able to get as much information in the organization. From a compliance person too, this tool will help you know these are the places where we have a fingerprint of this data, so that we can put the right retention labels and not fall a victim of defaulting on a particular framework or engagement. All of this, like I said, is just talking about how you use the tool, whether it's PST, export, search. Like I said, you would have the actual email. You will get out the actual email and have it. That's how powerful the tool is. Who should have it? You can also export an email to somebody. Most times that's what I used to do, because I didn't want a situation where the copy would be in my mailbox. Like, I also, as much as it was a cool skill to have. I needed to protect myself. I used to remember some investigations, and and when I come home, I'll tell my husband that get ready, I feel go prison, because the kind of investigation I'm doing, like if for any reason I get compromised too, like I need to find a way to justify that I'm innocent. So I was always on the edge. So you have a way, so it allows you to do certain export and push it out without totally keeping it. So look at this scenario here. Yeah, so you can see investigators, e-discovery managers, tied to the agencies. So you can create, if you're someone who, there's an investigation, they come, you can tie the e-discovery manager and the investigators to the agencies, to a particular case, right? In this instance, agencies that tie to the Microsoft 365 boundary that they want to investigate. Again, you can search and delete. We had instances where Microsoft, okay, it's not here. There's a place Microsoft will put, please make sure you're doing this in line with the law of your organization or your country. There are cases where organizations will say, this particular email, delete it off everybody's mailbox. Right? We've had cases like that. And is this is the tool that you use to do it. So in those instances, what I would recommend to you, if you ever have a boss who tells you to do something like this, please make sure that the boss commits himself to an email. One of the things my CIO then used to say, that he didn't understand how I was no matter how it came, my CIO could say it came from the MD, and he would call on the phone. And so what I would do is I would send him an email, because I don't want to tell my CIO. I will send him an email and say, oh sir, this is just to confirm that I understand the acts. I understand the acts, but I'm trying to document. And the reason is the organization was fully regulated. I did not want a situation where that Oga could leave and then something will come and they'll say, oh, Joy has been the person sitting on these platforms for the last 5-6 years, and all I had was a word of mouth. Somebody told me to do what? How do I save my head? My husband will be going around looking for a lawyer that can vindicate me. So what will I do? I will come back to my seat and I will send an email and say, I would run the e-discovery, I will see what they want, and I will see this, and I will say, and I will now send an email and say, I just wanted to be sure I understand the act. This is what I'm supposed to do. I might not put in verbatim, because remember, the e-discovery, I'm using a keyword. So if I call out what that information is in my email to him, my e-discovery will pick out my own and delete it, right? But I wanted my copy to be my evidence. So I just put, I'm supposed to do this. I put the context, and I'll get a yes, this, and that's all I needed. I will save that email and I'll go and action what they say I should action. It's just my hygiene way of working. So I'm just sharing it, some of my tips in being a exchange administrator, being in forensic and investigation, cybersecurity. These are ways I just safeguard my own head, because life not per head. At the end of the day, we're all just working for somebody. So, but these tools are powerful and they can allow you to do that. So you can search and delete an email. Again, if it is malicious, we've had places where a phishing email has come into the organization and people are just mistakenly forwarding. That's another valuable use case for this kind of tool. You can look for the header of the email, look for the subject of the email, search across everywhere where that content is, or the attachment that came with it, and you can delete it. So that's another powerful use case. So again, if you're in the forensic and threat management, you can do it. Even though now Microsoft has so improved that from the Microsoft Office, you can initiate the threat map and you can find everywhere that data is. But e-discovery content search is another way to search and delete. So the difference between the content search, the standard, and the premium are just what you can do. They're all the same interface. You can use PowerShell for those who love PowerShell. Very good. And like I was responding to the person who asked for PowerShell last week, that it's not like I didn't want to explain. Like the way I know PowerShell is I just copy and paste. I know how to understand what the conditions are, but I'm not an authority in it. I can't create my own PowerShell script from the start. So I rely heavily on people who do it, but I have this huge knowledge base that I store my PowerShell script. If I use it the first time, it works for me. I do it. I can tweak it because once I see it, the good thing with PowerShell is like English. I can understand what it's for, tweak it, and once it gives me what I want, I save it in my repositories so that when next time I have a task, I just use the same thing. So PowerShell is good for things around e-discovery, but it has the GUI that you can use also to initiate it. So just the difference between the content and this is what you can do. So with standard, you can export. With standard, you can export. With standard, you can put litigation hold, and that content will never be deleted until that litigation hold is taken off. While with so you can see in this use case, you can preserve content to Mailbox, OneDrive, 365 group. You can do an infinite hold. Like I said, it will just, that email will never be deleted out, or that content will never be deleted from any of these storage locations until you are the one that remove it from the hold or you delete the hold. So that's what the standard does for you. For the premium, again, you can export. For the premium, the difference is you have workflows that you can use. So if you're in the legal, right? So when I see lawyers who want to transition into tech, right? And I tell them, go into the data protection space. They don't necessarily have to learn anything. If they come and learn how to use e-discovery, they can become investigation people during litigations or IT or even organization investigations. And as a legal team person, you can request for access that allows you to use this to pull out information, put something on a workflow, put it on free. So premium gives you extensive features from the standard and the content search. You can also use it to process, you can use it to analyze. Again, also for this one, you can export for both internal and external. So you can even query emails that were sent, like if the conversation went out of the organization, you can see it and you can query. How do you implement this? Very simple. You turn it on, you assign the right licenses, and you put configurations at the global level that do not allow anybody. Yeah, you can see here, you can work with up to 1 terabyte of data, right? And you can export up to 5 million documents or 500 GB worth of data. So this is for maybe, like I said, you might not see the value today, but you might find yourself in an environment tomorrow that they need to do investigation. You are like, oh, we use M365. You just remember that I can use this tool, or you can use this tool to query the environment and get those kind of information. Yeah. So this whole you can see I'm just rushing this more around auditing, investigation, discovery. That's what this is about. Forensic. This is where all of this particular functionality in Microsoft Premium is allowed, so that you can again, remember, we fed off from the record management and retention. You can use this just even because you want to understand the kind of data that exists in your organization and how to put the right retentions, or you can use it for the actual investigations and audits that you need. So that's it. That's what this particular slide is. So that's why I felt that we could rush this one today. On that note, we are done with everything Purview from a record management, data lifecycle protection. And the last topic is insider risk and PREVA management, which I would leave for week 6. For next week, we'll focus more on labs, practice, use cases. Any question?
I don't have a question for today. It's just like I put on the chat. It's I just wanted to get some more hands-on on the SIT driver's license thing. So when you're done with this.
Yeah. Now, the audit side of it is, remember, all this thing we are doing, right? Like I said, I also I wanted to be accountable, right? Because I could have access and be abusing it. So that's where the audit side. So auditors come to audit us. The auditors can now use that functionality to see those of us who have e-discovery access, what kind of queries are we doing. So you could see somebody maybe querying the CEO's mailbox all the time, or the CFO mailbox, and then you could ask, because the audit will show it, and you could ask, which kind of work are you doing, right, that is requiring you every time to query there. So imagine where somebody is working for a cybercrime cartel in your organization and position themselves in the email environment, and they create a case management whereby the cyber crime people would have compromised the CFO account. So whenever I initiate a transaction, they want to use their insider. So that's where, when we look at insider threats, we begin to see use their insider to do the e-discovery, and he will always be deleting off that malicious instruction email. And so the person in the team who keeps thinking he's getting an email from the CFO and actioning would say he saw an email, right, that gave him approval, and based on that email he did he genuinely thought he was actioning an instruction by the CFO. Meanwhile, the cartel have their insider in your team that is purging, right? So when they are done, they stand up, they leave. What will happen is that when it's found out, is that finance person that will be picked up. Then the finance person will be saying, I'm very sure that I got an email from the boss. The boss is saying, look at my mailbox, I didn't send you anything. I'm very sure I didn't send you anything. And it's like, you sent me, and he can't find anything. If I'm in those kind of investigations, because we're trained to, everybody's a culprit, when we take everybody in that kind of thing, you go back to run e-discovery. So as an auditor, you want to see, has anybody run e-discovery on people's accounts to purge XYZ person's email? Because remember that exchange flow we gave, because you know that email can be deleted at the user end and deleted at the back end. So what if somebody is deleting the emails at the back end, and then with the audit access, you'll be able to see that somebody is deleting off e-discovery, someone is conducting e-discovery search on people's account that and deleting it, or on this finance person's account and deleting it. So that's how you can now close an investigation. So even the person has left the organization, you kind of put some closure that validates, oh, this person is innocent. It might become a loss to the organization, but the point is, that's it. So that's why you see in ISO, HR is very important as one of the scope of ISO, because the people you employ in the organization, background checks on them, all of that, play into the life cycle of cyber threats, right? Because we have seen cases like this where people are recruited to sit in organizations, and they'll be working like you on your day-to-day job. You don't know, but when they're ready to strike, they strike, and they don't mind if it takes them 1 to 3 years.
I just wanted to chip in something, Joy. Can I go on?
Yes, please. Hold on. In the absence of any questions, so that I can stop the recording and we move to our normal knowledge sharing from experience. So do we have any questions for a very particular with what we've learned today? If you have general questions, that's fine, even if it's still on pause view, but I can stop the recording. Okay, so let me stop the recording and then we can go on.